This podcast is a Cannonball Media production. Welcome to Brothers to Boston, a podcast blending endurance and inspiration, where each mile tells a story. Discover the world of marathons and the secrets of peak performance with hosts Chad and Dennis Sanschagrin. Engage with top runners, coaches, nutritionists, and others shaping health and wellness. More than just a podcast, it's a source of personal growth and universal insights. Ready for the journey? Subscribe and follow Brothers to Boston on social media. Let's begin this journey with Brothers to Boston.
All right, this is it. This is the first episode of Brothers to Boston. Little bit of a harebrained scheme I had working with Chad and Cannonball Media to, just tell our story a little bit, talk a little bit about what we've experienced as older runners chasing a dream that I didn't think was possible. Certainly when I first started doing this, or when I saw Chad lumbering down Fifth Avenue in the New York City Marathon, didn't think it was possible. But here we are. We're getting. So here's the idea. Chad and I are going to share with you, kind of our journey from just getting started in running all the way through the World Majors and eventually to the Boston Marathon, and what it took to get here. Some of the fun that we've had along the way and some of the challenges as well. For me, I really thought that this would be a great opportunity for us to, share what we've been learning along the way, because we've learned a lot. And, it hasn't always been easy. In fact, it's been difficult a lot of the time, but it definitely is rewarding. And I know there's a lot of people out there like me who are really, hungry for information, hungry for knowledge about how to get better. And there was kind of two extremes from my perspective on, what was available out in the marketplace. There was like the hardcore coaches who were really catering to the 20-something crowd that had just finished college track and were like ready to go professional. And then there was the other end of the spectrum, which was really kind of built for completely novice runners who just did it for enjoyment and just maybe wanted to run a one marathon or just get a little bit better, but there wasn't a lot in between. That people that had higher aspirations, maybe not to be pro, but to definitely compete, and get better. I didn't see a lot of that out in the marketplace. And I did find some things, some podcasts and books and things, but, at the end of the day, I felt like, hey, this would be really cool if there was somebody else like me or you, Chad, or our friends that were trying to get to Boston, get to all the world majors. Maybe they could learn something from us.
Yeah. What's interesting is you said it. You said it started 6 years ago with me lumbering down Fifth Avenue, but it really actually started well before that. I'm saying you ran your first marathon when you were how old? 27?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had this, so we'll go through our background, but, I had this spark in my late 20s. And I had a neighbor. I was living in Stafford, Virginia at the time, and I had a neighbor who had just qualified for the Boston Marathon. And he was also in his 20s. I think he had just run a 3-hour marathon somewhere. And he was in the military, and I was like, man, that's pretty cool, And he's like, well, you could do it. And I was like, I could do what? And he's like, you could run a marathon. Yeah. And I was like, you think? I was like, that seems like 26 miles. And so I did it. I just signed up for the Marine Corps marathon. I set a goal that I wanted to run a marathon before I turned 30. So back then, I had to actually call them and get an application sent to me. And then I filled out the application and I mailed it back to them. And this was in 2001. And then I got my bib and a package sent to me. And I ended up running. No, you got to be like Marine Corps marathon. You got to be, waiting up late at night to be the first one on when the lottery opens. And then I ran the Marine Corps marathon in 2001. It was actually really cool because that was the October after September 11th, and the Pentagon had just been hit, a month earlier. And so, if you know anything about the Marine Corps marathon, it goes through, Washington, D.C., it goes around the Pentagon, goes up to the Iwo Jima Memorial, and the marathon route actually took us right past the part of the Pentagon that had been bombed. And there was a trailer there from the company that was repairing it, and there was a guy on the top of the trailer that stood there for like 5 hours waving an American flag to all the runners. It was
That's
really
awesome.
really cool experience.
Yeah.
But it hurt like hell, and it was basically the end of my running career for the next 15 years.
Like that was
You know,
it.
I
I'm not,
really didn't do it much any after that. So I checked the box. You know,
Yeah.
I accomplished it.
yeah,
So
I'm not
that was
doing
my
that.
first
I'm not
marathon.
doing that again until 15 years
No,
later.
no, it's
Yeah. I think
it does hurt.
I think
It
you're
does
right
hurt.
to go. So it started for me. Obviously 6 years ago at the New York City Marathon. No clue that here I am 38 marathons later. That I'd be thinking that one doing a podcast about running. I didn't even consider myself a runner. Obviously, I am. Be able to help other people run, but I think what's interesting about this idea of this podcast is there's a lot more. Running itself is easy. The mechanics of running are easy. You put one foot in front of the other. You swing your arms and you move forward. You propel forward. But it's all the psychological stuff that makes it hard. And then when you get the psychological tuned in, which is never really possible to be, you can never be perfect at that. Then you start thinking, oh, mechanics. Oh, how do you wait a minute, what about fueling? What about shoes? What about rest? What about recovery? What about all these other things? And it becomes a full blown, just like anything else, a full blown skill that you got to figure out how to get better at. And that's what's interesting. It's like, how do I get the person who's how do we get the person that's just run their first marathon or sitting on the couch thinking, I would love to run a marathon. And there's something with obviously a marathon, but how do you get that person the tools they need at the level they are, communicate the level they are to help them on that path?
Yeah, I mean it's that old saying, the sea of knowledge is surrounded by the shoreline of ignorance, right? So
Yeah.
the more you learn, the more you learn about what you don't know.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly
so, as you're chasing a goal, and you're trying to improve, you realize all the things that you didn't understand. The if you think back to that first New York City Marathon and like
Oh,
what you did to prepare, what you did
oh,
during the race, and what you did, afterwards compared to what you're doing now. I mean, it's like it's not even
yeah,
comparable.
yeah.
So
It
yeah,
took,
the running is easy, like,
yeah.
but it's all the other stuff that's gonna,
Uh,
eventually make a difference and make you better. That makes,
uh, oh
that's
yeah.
worth learning about. So
Oh yeah. I wore basketball shorts, a basketball shirt, like a cotton shirt, I think it was. Actually, I wore my Under Armour shirt that I've worn on every marathon. But I didn't have the right shoes. I just picked out running shoes. I didn't know what running shoes to wear, what I was supposed to wear. Fueling, I didn't like. I don't even remember what I did for water. All I know is that it took me 6 hours and it hurt like hell. And I'm like, I'm never doing this shit again, ever in my life. I'm never doing this again. Uh, I didn't even know about the world majors. I knew New York was a world major after I signed up, but I didn't know about this whole Abbott's world major 6-star medal thing. And even after the first year, like the first marathon, I still didn't know about it. It wasn't until after you and I ran it the following year that we're like, oh, wait a minute. Wait,
yep,
let's see
yeah,
if
exactly.
can we do these 6-star what is this 6-star thing in these marathons? Oh wait, there's London, there's Berlin, there's Tokyo, there's Chicago, wait, what? And then lo and behold, here comes the drive towards 6, which
Yeah,
obviously we're really
absolutely.
close to now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me that was like, we when we first started. So Chad signed up for New York. So, and you could tell him the story about why you did that. But when he signed up for New York, I knew what was going to happen. I absolutely knew it because my entire life I've been dragged into really stupid decisions by Chad. We it's always like, hey, we should do this, we should do that,
we should
you know,
we should
and
start a fire in the backyard.
yeah, we should, so my entire life, I'm the responsible one. I'm the one that's supposed to make good decisions.
You're
And,
the
and
older one.
here's Chad with a great idea.
Doing
So his great
stupid
idea.
shit.
And I'm like, Chad, listen, I've done this. I checked that box 15 years ago. I'm not running another marathon. And so he says, well, why don't you just, just run with me, just train with me a little bit, whatever. And it was like, fine, whatever. So like, 2 days later, I signed up for the Baltimore half marathon.
Oh
And
yeah,
that was my compromise. Like, I'm going to run the Baltimore half.
I
He's
remember
going to run
that.
the full. And then I was like, God damn it. I told him I wasn't going to do this. And so then I did that. And I'll never forget that first run, though. It was like,
Oh,
I live in, Ellicott City, Maryland. It's a very hilly area. But that first run in my neighborhood, I was like, all right, 2 miles. I'm going 2 miles today. Nope.
no.
I was like, I didn't even make it up the first hill.
Yeah, that was me.
And
That
I
was
was
me.
walking.
My first training run, I didn't do many training runs for New York, and my training run was a mile. And I got this coach. I begged this guy to coach me. He didn't really want to coach me, but I kind of persuaded him. And he was like, all right, go out for a 1 mile, just a 1 mile run. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I was 43 years old at the time. 44 or something like that, and I was like, I know I'm older, but I can certainly. I'm not in shape, and I'm not out of shape. I'm average. I can certainly. I'm 6'8". I can run more than a mile. I said, just run a mile. And I'm like, this is so stupid. I remember telling Kim, my wife, I was like, I don't know what I did. This guy wants me to run a mile. Like, I feel like I should go do 10 or something, and he's got me doing a mile. And I didn't even make it out of our cul-de-sac. My lungs were on fire. And I was like, and I convinced myself it was just the lactic acid. I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, the lactic acid burned up in my lungs. It's fine. I didn't know what lactic acid was. And so I was like, it'll dissipate. At a half a mile, that was just at the bottom of the cul-de-sac. At a half a mile, I didn't know what pace. I was just sprinting as fast as I could, which was probably, looking back, was probably like a 14-minute mile or something. And I get a half a mile. I'm exhausted. I have a jug of water, like a big water bottle with me. I've already finished that at the half a mile mark. At a mile,
Right.
I'm on the side of the road, literally panting, and I was so dumb because I ran a mile out from my house, and now I was a mile from my house. So I had to call my wife to come pick me
Oh, now
up.
you got to go back.
I'm like, I did my mile. I can't breathe. This is the dumbest shit ever. I'm literally on the side of the road in Bel Air, Maryland, like dying. I'm like, can you come get me? I'm a mile from home. Like, I couldn't make it back. And I was like, this is the dumbest shit ever. But I had already roped you into, I'd already committed. You hadn't been part of it yet, but I had already committed to telling everybody I was going to run the New York City Marathon. So my ego forced me to run it. I didn't do any training. I'm saying, I think I had the whole training program. I think I ran 200 miles. And I think that was like a big thing. I was like, I got to the New York City Marathon. I was like, I ran 200 miles. I am absolutely ready for this.
Right.
No.
Right. Yeah.
No, that was not the case.
Yeah, it was funny, the world major thing. It was kind of cool because, and I think you're right. I don't think I learned about the world majors until after I'd finished New York in 2017, which was the second running for you.
Yeah.
And we had run, it was you, me, our friend Brian had run or was running it. And at that point, we had a pretty cool community built of friends that were out all running together.
Right.
And so it had started to become this thing where we were really having a good time. And when I learned about the world majors and we started talking about it, and we were like, yeah, we should do that. In my mind, it was really the ultimate quest. It was because it was going to be challenging physically. Obviously, you got to run 6 majors, 6 marathons. And I didn't know anything about Boston at that point. It was just like Boston was just another marathon.
Yeah.
But for me, the part of the appeal of it was the whole logistical side of it, because this is not just about signing up for marathons and going and running them. There's a whole nother thing associated with how do you even get into these marathons? How do you travel there? How do you train? The timing of it all. So it's been a really cool experience, and I can't wait to share it with this audience. But each of these races presents a unique challenge in terms of how you get in, how you prepare, and how you actually execute it.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I think that knowing that there's a very few amount of people, I know we have the stats and stuff on how many people have done the world majors, but it is, if you think running a marathon is like the 1% of the world will run a marathon, like 1% of those 1%, or less than 1% of those 1% will ever do all the world majors. Less than 10% will ever run more than one marathon. And so the idea of like thinking about the world majors, for me, it was always, once I said I was going to do it, I was going to do it. There was no like debate of whether it was going to happen. It was just like, all right, how am I going to make it happen? How is this going to happen? And once we started learning about it, Boston became the ultimate quest. And to get into these marathons, I assume we'll talk about it at some point. But to get into these marathons, there's multiple doors to get in. You can qualify, you can enter lottery, or you can write a check for raise money for a charity. And I've gotten in, so now I've run New York 6 times, I've run Chicago 3 times, I've run Berlin, Tokyo, London will be in a couple months, and then next year Boston. So this will be when we run London in April, that'll be my 13th world major in that time.
Wow.
12th, yeah. 13th world major in that time. But the quest for me was always, once I became cognizant of like what everything was, that I would do anything I could to get in all the 5, but I was only going to run Boston when I qualified.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I felt the same way. It was, and I really felt like, the first time, the first world major I ran, which was New York, I finished in, 4 hours and 49 minutes. And just to kind of skip ahead, Boston requires qualification windows. Basically, each age group has a qualifying time, and that's just to put an application in, and then below that, there are years where you have to qualify beyond your qualification time in order to actually get in the race, because there's so many people that qualify. So like this year for the 2024 race, in April of 2024, you had to beat your qualifying time by 5 minutes and 30 seconds, roughly. Oof. So, so here I am in New York running a 4:49, right? And now I'm 51, and my qualifying time is 3:25, and yours is as well, right? Yeah. So 3:25, and now I got to cut 5.5 minutes off that potentially. So now we're at 3:20 or under. Yeah. So when you run a marathon at 4:49, and you think, and you're thinking, wow, I'm going to qualify for Boston at 3:30 or 3:20 or whatever it is, that to me at the time seemed impossible. It really seemed impossible.
Agreed.
And it was only over time and starting to see improvement, and starting to see, that the effort and the energy that you put into it, the intention that you put into it, you actually get out. And that's one of the things I love about running, is that it's directly, comparable or
correlated,
correlated with your effort.
Oh,
There are some sports where, and I believe that you can get better at anything that you put your mind to, but there's some sports that, just, let's face it, you're just not going to compete at a high level, just because you don't have enough time, or you don't have the genetics for it. Yeah. But running is one of those things. I'm just convinced that running's one of those things that there's a high correlation between the effort you put in and what you get out of it. So when I started to see those improvements, and I was like, you know what, this might actually be possible. I might actually be able to run a qualifying time for Boston and do this thing and finish this quest. And that, the day that happened, I remember something kind of like sparked in me. It was like, okay, now it's on. Now I'm going to get serious about this.
Because what happened was, I'm assuming, at least what happened for me, was you remove the lens of limitation. Like this, like the tyranny, right, of this idea of like this tyranny of like, is it possible, is now removed, because you remove, like, okay, I see that it's possible. I see that there's a recipe. I see there's a recipe to figuring it out. And what's interesting about what you said about running is, running for me is one of those things that, with intentionality, yes, your time gets better, but everything, it seems like so many other things get better as well. As you get faster, as you get, and it's not everything is about speed, but if you want to get fast enough to qualify for Boston, it takes a lot of intention. But it takes more than miles. I ran last year, last year, to 2022, I ran damn near 3,000 miles. Right? So I did calendar club twice. I ran 12 marathons last year in 2022, 13 marathons. And yeah, I got faster, but I've gotten faster my improvement over the last year, this year, 23, where I ran less miles, my improvement was greater because I ran with intention. Every run had a purpose. Every run had a plan. Every run had a strategy. It wasn't just running miles. Now that certainly helps a lot, but what happened was I lost a ton of weight. I started weightlifting, so I gained a ton of muscle. I started eating better, so I could fuel better for the run. So like it changed a lot of other things in my life. It also produced a ton of emotional pride, which we know is the greatest intrinsic motivator we have. So running is a vehicle. Running with a quest of qualifying for Boston or hitting a certain goal, besides just running a marathon, is that same vehicle on steroids. It's a vehicle that it's like a Ferrari. Like running a marathon is amazing for anybody who does it, whether it takes you 6 hours or 2 hours. It doesn't make a difference. You're a marathon finisher. It takes a ton of discipline. It takes a ton of hard work. Qualifying from Boston has exponential other growth benefits in it, I think, as well.
Yeah. I think for me, like there's a lot of reasons that I want to qualify for Boston. It's funny because is the goal the World Majors or is the goal Boston, right? And I think they're kind of one and the same now. But for me, Boston is gonna, doing what it takes to qualify for Boston. You can't fake it. You can't cheat.
No.
It is so important to be disciplined. And I ran Wineglass. We both ran Wineglass 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, and in October of 22, and I missed Boston qualifying time by 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes. I had the absolute best training block of my entire life. I was clicking on every run. I had full intention. Everything was going perfectly. And I gave everything I possibly could in that race. Could I have done some things better? Of course. But I gave everything I could in that race. I missed the qualifying window by 2.5 minutes. It's not like, so you can do everything right and you're still not there. And you have to, you have to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And you have to do it harder and you have to do it better. And it just it just sits there. And it just waves at you and it says, "Here I am. Come get me." You know?
Yeah.
You want it? I'm here. And so for me, it's just such a cool measurement of what you like to call, betterment. And I really think that's the case. You don't qualify for Boston unless you get better, unless you're some freak of nature. And we don't talk about those people.
We don't talk about those. Right. That's exactly right. But I think that for the masses, and I'm sure over the course of this podcast, we'll get into all of it because there's so much, like I said, there's so many things other than just the training or the coaching or the fueling. There's the psychological part of it. And for me, the qualifying for Boston happens in the dark. And what I mean by that is, for me, I'm a morning runner. And when I say happens in the dark, well, one, most people can't run during the day. They're working. They don't own that time. They got kids. They got responsibilities. They got this and that. So you have a big block of window time that you don't own. And for me, it's about mastering the time in the dark. And what I mean by that is the time in the dark of when it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm laying in bed and it's pitch dark in the room and it's pitch dark outside. That's the first battle. The first battle isn't the mile up the hill. The first battle is I'm laying in bed in the dark, nice and comfortable, and like, am I going to do what is required of me today by getting out of this bed? And then you get out of bed and you try not to wake your wife or your spouse or your significant other up or your kids up, and you're like tiptoeing out the house to go outside in the freezing cold to try to figure out, like, okay, what's my run? You have it all planned out, but now you're running in the dark. my quest to Boston is 99% of it are the battles in the dark when nobody else is around. And so when you have a quest to achieve something great, achieve something that very few will ever achieve something that requires you to become a different person. Um, most of that quest will happen in the dark. And to me, that's if you can master that, all of a sudden every other door in your life opens.
Yeah, that's such a great line. I love that. That's going to be a bumper sticker, or watch for that on Instagram, guys, because that'll be a chatism for sure. I agree. I mean, it's not sexy. It's
Oh,
just not. The work that's required to do this. It's just not sexy. It's waking up early, going out and running by yourself. It's bringing your running shoes when you travel. It's not drinking the night before. It's all that stuff that is required. But each one of those things makes you a better person.
correct.
Makes you better at everything. Since we've started this, my income has gone up. My relationships have gotten better. Everybody I'm around it seems like they've gotten better.
That's
It's,
right.
it spreads through every part of your life, and it's impossible for it not to. So
Agreed.
for that reason, I'm excited. So just a couple things we should talk about the podcast, because we're going to cover a lot of different things on this podcast. We're going to cover obviously the training, the recovery, nutrition, some of the aspects of the community around running, logistics. There's a lot. The logistics of the world majors is just off the charts, but logistics, the equipment and apparel and things like that, um, intangibles. Hell, we might even go over our favorite playlists,
Yeah.
right? Um, Race day prep, and then what's next. Hey, we're gonna check the box for Boston one day for
Oh
sure. Hopefully, it's at London,
yeah. Hopefully we check
but
it at London, right, in a couple
but
months.
that won't be the end of it. As much as I tell myself that'll be the last time I run, I know it won't be.
No,
So
no.
we'll
Well,
we'll talk
especially if
about
they
what's
add another
next.
world major. There's,
Oh
we both
God, they're talking about Sydney
Sydney,
now.
Australia. We have both done ultra marathons. We've both run 50-mile runs. So there's a 100-mile run. I think
Oh
one of
yeah,
the things that we're also going to discuss, and is we're going to discuss other things, right? So we're going to discuss like what's the reason you should get off the couch and go run a marathon or go run a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon or whatever the distance is. Like, what's the benefits of doing it? We may bring on guests. Is that right? Like,
oh yeah,
we have a
yeah. We're
great
gonna have some
coach.
great guests on
Uh,
this podcast.
Mario Ferrelli is both of our coaches, and if you don't know who Mario Ferrelli is, you got to check this dude out because he is the coaches of coaches. I'm saying the guy is insanely ridiculous. He has a great podcast.
Yeah, shout out to his podcast, The Morning Shakeout.
Yeah, the
It's
one shake
awesome.
guy is phenomenal. Todd Anderson, who's obviously um, recovery expert. He's all things running. My buddy Jesse Itzler, who owns All Day Running. We may bring all kinds of guests on here to help us. And so if you're listening right now and go, oh, it's going to be a podcast all about running, no. Is the vehicle, the foundation running? Yep. But it's going to correlate to one of the best coaching books of all time, best coaching books, leadership books of all time, is called The Inner Works of Tennis, or The Inner Skills of Tennis, I think it's called.
Right.
Right? It's a book about tennis, but it's one of the best coaching training books of all time, right? So we look at it and say, well, should I only get on this podcast because it's about running? No, you should listen to the podcast. You should share the podcast. You should talk about the podcast because it's about pushing yourself to become a better version of yourself. It's pushing yourself to become version 2.0 or 3.0. We're going to use running as a vehicle, as a vehicle to talk about that. But if you get on the call, you're going to get something out of it. And the goal is one of three things. For every podcast, I think for me, I want every listener to do one of three things. I want you to either learn something. So if you learn something, awesome. Remember something, right? So I remember when I used to do this. I remember when I was a kid and I ran barefooted and how good it felt. And when I ran the 5K at school, we were doing the fun run at school in 5th grade. I loved it. So, you may remember something. Or number three, you may realize something.
Right.
You may come to realize that you're a lot more capable than you think. I'm going to turn 50 years old in a couple of days, and I'm going to go into 50 years old the healthiest I've ever been for sure. Um, Financially free, my financial status is the best it's ever been. My relationships are the best they've ever been. My business is booming. My relationships with my family, friends, they're booming. And so it all happened because I learned things, I remember things, and I realized things. And if you can use those three things as a catalyst, oh man, there's a whole world of abundance waiting for you.
100%. Yeah, I think one of the things that is important for people to understand too is that the this is not all about pumping you up and giving you motivation. It's about giving you tools. I mean, these are tools that you can use in any aspect of your life. It's not just about running. It can be about any goal that you have or anything that you've wanted to do. I mean, we get one trip on this rock and that's it. And if you're not doing it now, then you're never going to do it. And I would just say, hey, start now. Start now if you want. And what's really cool, Chad, is I joke about how you dragged me into this, but the number of people that you and I and others have touched and started a healthy habit because of they saw what we were doing is humbling.
Thousands.
It really is humbling. When I finished the Chicago Marathon with my daughter, when you finished, New York and Chicago with Madison, when my other daughter, Cammie, when she said, I'm going to run a 10K, we ran a 10K together just out of the blue. I mean, that's what this is about. Boston's great, and I'm going to put another medal up on my board, and it's going to be awesome. But the people that we touch and the lives that we changed as a result of what we're doing, that's next level. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, medals without inspiring others are just trinkets on a wall. So, like the idea of having a medal that says, in my quest to get to Boston, I was able to get my daughter. I was able to inspire my daughter, Mackenzie, to run a half marathon in Tuscaloosa. I was able to get Meredith Chapman on her quest to run the world majors, right? So she's right behind me on the world majors, and we'll have to have her on the show for sure at some point. I was able to get other people to run. I was able to get other people to focus on something that was important to them. So every medal has a story behind it, and you would think it was the story of Chad running a marathon. No, it's a vehicle. It's a tool. It was a tool to help contribute to the well-being of every human being that we interact with, and that's the quest that we're on. So this podcast is just another tool to help people remember, help people learn, help people realize that there's another level of their life out there for sure.
Let's go.
We
got this.
All right.
This is awesome, man.
Yeah. So what's next? What do we do next, Dennis? What's the next level? Where do we go from here? What do people do right now that are listening to this first episode or seeing this on social media? What's the plan?
I would say share, like, and follow. I mean, we are going to be putting out podcasts weekly.
Yeah.
We're going to have lots of different guests, all produced by Cannonball Media, which is really exciting.
Shout out.
We are going to we're going to tell our story as we make our way through Boston. You're going to come along for the ride. And hopefully you get a lot out of this, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, we have London Marathon in, it's
123 days.
123 days from today. We're both dialed in with our training. We're going to try like hell to qualify. We need a 3:20, really. I'm saying the qualifying time is 3:25, but you really got to be 3:20 probably, at least, to get there. It's going to take a Herculean effort, but we're going to take you along. We're going to talk about our runs. We'll talk about the breakdowns. We'll talk about all the failures that happen in the dark. I talk about the wins in the dark. We're not going to shy away from the failures that happen in the dark too. We're going to bring the failures to light, and then you'll come with us to London, at least virtually. We'll do an episode in London. We're here. What happens? Let's go. And then when we qualify or don't qualify, we'll talk about what the next step is. Okay, so my goal yesterday on my run yesterday, I had a run yesterday, and I was thinking about the podcast. I was thinking about my London, and my goal is to qualify, obviously, for Boston, London, and then my goal is to PR Boston. That Boston will be my fastest marathon I will ever run. It'll also, by the way, if I add one more marathon in between London and Boston, Boston will be my 40th marathon. And so it's all lined up to have my fastest PR at Boston, which will be
Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go. And if you do that, you qualify again.
I qualify for
then.
Boston at Boston. Oh,
At Boston.
What?
Bostonception.
Mind blowing. So as Dennis said, make sure you right now, click the link in the social. If you're seeing this on social media, click the link. Go subscribe to the podcast. Oh, I don't listen to podcasts. Listen to it anyway. You'll see it on Spotify. You'll subscribe anyway. You see it on Spotify. You'll see it on Apple Music. You'll see it on all the socials. Share this because somebody may want to get off the couch. Somebody may want to find the best version of themselves, and we might be able to help them get there.
Much love.
Much love and gratitude. Next week, same time, same place. Let's go.
See ya.